Hi everyone, welcome to Brave Talks. I'm Aidan and I'll be your host for this episode. Recent research suggests that music engagement not only shapes our personal and cultural identities, but also plays a role in mood regulation. So, to help us get a better understanding of this, I'm joined by Lee Holder, and we will be discussing arts and mental health. So, grab a cup of tea or your favourite beverage. This is Brave Talks. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Brave Talks. Today I'm joined by Lee and I'm thrilled to have a conversation about a really interesting subject. But of course, the first thing we'd like to do is ask a little bit about yourself. So, who is Lee?
That's a really complicated question to open with. So my name is Lee. I'd like to say that I'm Lee Holder at work and Lee Chaos at play. I'm a music hacker is the phrase that I'm now going by. I'm not really a musician, but I work in the field of music and sound. And during the day, I work for an organisation called the Music Works as the disability lead.
And thank you for being here. It's really amazing. I really appreciate it. So what is your background in kind of that kind of music and the arts and using it as a therapeutic tool?
Really interesting. So it's like music was kind of like a thing that I was doing alongside other things for the longest time. So I'm actually a qualified special effects model maker of all things.
Oh wow.
So learned how to build spaceships, prosthetics, industrial models and that kind of thing. And I was dreadful at it, absolutely shockingly bad, but really liked the kind of group of people that I was with. And there were two things that kept me going to the end of my course. So the first was that I was on the train line that allowed me to take me directly to London. So I got spent a lot of time going to gigs rather than lectures. A really exciting time in the 90s when the kind of music I liked was around. And the other thing was I sort of did a hostile takeover for the student union and got involved in events management and kind of running events and putting on club nights and things like that as well, which kept me in college effectively. So I did 3 years where I kind of scraped through my degree, but was doing all these other things. And then when I left university as it was at that point, I started as an arts graduate and ended up graduating from a university because it got taken over, so that was never part of the plan either. When I graduated, I was like, well, music is really the thing that I want to be interested in. You know, it's really what kind of kept me going throughout all of that. It was like the one common thread at that point, even though I was doing other arts alongside it. I formed a band on leaving college and started working for Virgin, the shops, or Our Price as it was back in the day. Goodness me, really showing my age here. Started to form my own band, and that was kind of, for me, was a really therapeutic thing to do, because it was bringing together all the elements of kind of like sort of like journaling and writing out my feelings and things like that. The kind of music I was making was quite cathartic and loud, and you know, quite angry music, but there was a lot of kind of like you know, emotional release from doing those kind of things. And I was lucky enough that I was able to kind of make a bit of a career out of that, and sort of, you know, was working just part-time jobs alongside putting together a career in the music industry with no real aspirations of becoming like a pop star or anything. But did manage to get our band signed to a record label that went bust about 18 months later. And then, because we had a really good working relationship with the label that went bust, we effectively managed to get back our own CDs that had been manufactured but not really distributed. And then I used that to start my own record label as well. So for a while, for about 5 or 6 years, in the late 90s, early noughties, I was running a record label that was effectively operating as a kind of workers collective for artists. Is nobody on there. We had a saying on the label, is like, the limousine is never coming. It was like you know, a catchphrase about realistic expectations, and everyone kind of like, but using it as a collective way of us going out and doing gigs, and selling each other's merch, and kind of like, you know, clubbing together so we could afford to put adverts in magazines and things like that. So it was a really good way of working, and partway through that I ended up sort of doing a little bit of a sort of teaching gig on the side and sort of showing other people how to do that. And that kind of kick-started my interest in, rather than doing things for myself, doing things kind of like for other people and helping them to make music, which had been part of what I was doing as a record label anyway, because I was involved in the engineering, the tour management and the promotion and publicity and everything anyway. So, but it would seem like a more hands-on way of doing that. And then I kind of like fell into teaching for a while. and did some college lecturing, and found that almost intolerably difficult, because there was always like a big kind of like friction between what the young people wanted to learn and what the syllabus told them they had to. And especially with something like music technology, which is where my interests were, um, the syllabus was always lagging behind what was happening in the industry a little bit. So we were teaching out of date information a lot of the time. I remember trying to get hold of 16 mil recording tape because it was in the syllabus, which nobody used anymore at that point, and just going, this is insane, I have no idea why we're doing this. And so then I could see that that was doing a bit of a number on my mental health, to be honest, and so I decided to move to part-time. And one of the gigs that I got to go alongside that was working in a care home, just sort of like going in and sort of effectively just being asked to entertain the people who were in the care home, and sort of like rocked up with a big box of like laptops and gadgets, and they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I thought we were here to make music with these people. And they were like, well, normally people just come in and play music at them. And I was like, that seems weird. That seems like a bit of a passive thing, you know, that we're just singing to them rather than engaging them in the music making. And so from that point onwards, I realized I was on a quite a different path. And I remember sitting in like a review meeting, and my boss at the time going, you really have to choose between, you know, lecturing as a higher education lecturer and working with people with disabilities. And I was like, that's rude, because firstly, it seems there's nobody with disabilities who's in higher education, which I knew to not be the case. And secondly, it's like, if you're expecting there to be a gap between the two, I'm going to pick the one that's more fun, which has always been my policy in life. It's like, you know, if I've got two choices, I know which is the most fun, which is the most shiny, which, you know, gives me those glimmers that make me feel excited to get out of bed. And I was like, actually, it's this disability work that I'm really, really interested in. And so from that point, I kind of like slowly, over a period of about 5 years, reskilled to do that, which has led me to my current role working for the Music Works.
That's brilliant. I mean, gosh, that's quite a journey as well.
Yeah, it's, I would say it's like the career in both senses of the word. It's like you know, you look behind and it seems to be a clear path, and you look in front and it's been doing this kind of careering for a long, long time. But it's really interesting. So I've got quite a bizarre and unique skill set. But the reason I love the role I'm in now is because it brings all of those disparate elements together, and kind of allows me to be quite good at problem solving, and know, you know, a lot about the music industry, a lot about the technology behind the music industry, that allows me to sort of excel in the field that I've ended up settling on.
You can clearly see like the passion you have for the music. Do you think that's a contributing factor to kind of helping, where you've brought that to others as a therapeutic tool?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was pivotal to you know, keeping my head together. I remember when I was young, I sort of had parents who seemed to be perpetually on the brink of divorce, and I would do one of two things. I would either put my headphones on and just blast music as loud as I could to just escape everything, or, you know, I'd be tinkering with electronic things to try and make that music myself as well. So for me, it was always an absolute escape. It was like, you know, a little kind of bubble that I could create for myself. And I've never forgotten how important that was to me. We work with a lot of young people who are in, you know, similar challenging backgrounds at home. And I always sort of like believe in the power of music as like a little bit of a sanctuary. But the other thing for me as well is it's really that, you know, it's often the only thing that like fully engages my brain as well. So I'm neurodiverse, quite late to that realization in my life. I always just felt a bit weird, which was an acceptable label for me. But now I've kind of like done more training and awareness around it through work, I've been like, no, this is me. This has always been me. This has always been how I am, to sort of slightly to one side. And music has this kind of ability to light up more of your brain than any other activity in the world. It's like when you're performing music, or you're taking part in a music activity, it's just igniting so many neurons at the same time. It's just there've been some studies on it. It's a fantastic book that I recommend called This Is Your Brain on Music, and they've done sort of MRI scans while people have been playing music, and it is the most alight your brain will ever be at any point in any activity at all. And I think, you know, if you're on kind of like the autistic spectrum, or neurospicy as we like to say, it's like, it's really, you know, those activities that, you know, really kind of like wake you up are the ones that you really kind of gravitate towards. So I think you see a lot more kind of neurodiverse people in the creative arts. So yeah, it's always been a really important aspect of my life. It's been a way of me kind of like expressing feelings. But the challenge that I had with it, especially when I was growing up, is that the music that I was presented with at school wasn't the music that I was listening to. It wasn't accessible to me. I was, I had an interest in being a pianist or playing keyboards. That was really the instrument that I was interested in. But we were never going to fit a piano through the door of where we lived as a kid. The lessons were too expensive. I didn't dare ask for them. So I could, it's like that wasn't available to me. It was only later in life when I was kind of working my own jobs that I was able to start buying equipment and sort of developing my musical skill. But I never forgot how alienating music at school was. And through the work that we've done with the Music Works, we found that that's a common thread. So we interviewed a few hundred young people, and we found that for like 92% of them, music was either the most important or was in the top 3 important things to them. So hugely important. And then we asked them how many were doing music at school, and it was less than 5%. So there's this huge disparity between the exciting music and the taught music that I think, as me as an individual, I hadn't really realised, but I've been trying to break that barrier down all the time. And now I kind of do that for a living as well, and try and, join those two things up a little bit. And try and, in a way, redress the balance for the horrible time that I had, and try and show people that there are alternative ways of doing this.
So you mentioned about kind of children at home or in their rooms. How have you witnessed the positive impact this has had on individuals with either disabilities or physical disabilities or mental health challenges?
Oh, it's mammoth. It's absolutely huge. I think because music is just something that's really, really exciting. And it's something that you can kind of you can experience passively and then kind of like become active in. It's a really, really good starting point for things. We've done some work with some profoundly disabled young adults, and for some of them, they it's like their day-to-day life. They don't do a great deal, and there's no real reason for them to be moving, for instance. It's they're quite sedentary, and from a care perspective, it's like that is it's like they're quite easy to manage if they're sedentary. But music can be a really good motivator for somebody. So there's a young person that we work with that we've just done a case study on, and he absolutely loves Slipknot, System of a Down, metal music of that kind of genre. But one of the care workers found out that he really, really loves a genre of music called Frenchcore, which is insanely fast dance music, loads of swearing in it. He absolutely adores it. And during lockdown, he was more or less catatonic. So he was clinically vulnerable. He was, he had to be left in his room. And there was a feeling that he just had quite a low quality of life and wouldn't really move a great deal because he had no reason to. And we've just opened a new studio in the centre of Gloucester. And we had the BBC coming in to do sort of piece on the new studio, and Andy came along, and for the first time he was able to hear his music really, really loud, and he literally started vibrating in his chair to the point where I was going, oh goodness, is he having a seizure? Yeah. And they were like, no, this is what he does when he's really excited. We just don't see it very often. And I was like, well, we have to get him in here. It's like, if the least we can do is play Slipknot really loud on a Thursday morning, and he can just enjoy the experience of it being really, really loud. And that was the starting point of this incredible journey for him. So we started coming in and doing one-to-one sessions. We took some of the tiny movements that he had and were able to turn those into musical gestures. And we made sure that those musical gestures were really loud. So he pressed a button and there was suddenly this huge oof, oof, oof beat coming out. And, he was like, oh, I did that. And there was that connection between the sound and the action that was really, really important for him. And from that, we built it up over a series of activities. We built some apparatus so that we could map where his leg was with accelerometers, so he was able to kind of like change filters on DJ software and do that kind of thing. And then we kind of realized that although he's registered blind as well, he could move his head, and that allowed us to track his head using some off-the-shelf equipment, so he could operate an iPad. And then with the iPad, we had like choices of really, really loud sounds, so we could work out where he was looking, even though he couldn't see. And then luckily his dad's a retired engineer, so we built him a rig around his wheelchair, and that allowed him to access buttons. So that allowed him to make choices. And over a series of weeks of coming in, we were able to develop what we call his spaceship, which is like a whole bunch of tech that's kind of like all cobbled together that allowed him to DJ with pretty much entire independence. So then we were like, right, okay, let's book him DJ gigs. Started getting him up onto stage, and people were like, this is amazing. So we're now looking at artist management for him and go, right, okay, he's doing DJ gigs now. We need to get him involved in like festivals and other events that we're doing, and start platforming him and start working around the logistics of getting a disabled artist onto a stage. So for him, that was absolutely transformative. But it's like there were a lot of, when I was kind of reflecting on his story for the case study, I was thinking there's a lot of parallels there between my journey as well, which isn't as extreme, but is very similar. It's like, you know, the ability to play music really loudly and get that sense of sensory overwhelm was absolutely pivotal for me. It's like finding the right instrument as well. This is something I say. It's like we work with loads of people who've had terrible experiences in the school system, and you know, they always say, oh, I'm not musical, I'm not a musician, I can't sing. I'm like, you probably just haven't found the right instrument yet. Because the choices when you're at school are like a recorder, a violin, a piano, you know, a couple of drums that have seen better days in the corner. And it's, you know, it's a lot of the equipment just, you know, isn't available. So I think it's about finding that right instrument, the right tool for the job, you know, that kind of like creates that excitement and drives people forward. So yeah, we've learned a great deal from this journey. And now we're kind of like starting to work with organizations to investigate how inclusive their technology is, so have those conversations in industry as well, and kind of like, you know, help to be the voice of the people who perhaps can't easily talk directly to these organizations, and say, well, we tried this, it was 80% good, but if we tweak this thing, it's going to be amazing. And it's going to open so many doors. And by and large, we're finding that people in the industry are really, really open to having those conversations, which I'm really excited about. I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting a kind of like, this is how it is, and that's you know, tough. But actually, there's, you know, when we get to have the right conversations with the right people, they're incredibly open about making changes and accommodations. So I think that's really exciting for the future.
That's brilliant. I mean, but everything you just said there is all around you in your role, empowering people and giving them, you know, more confidence. You were saying about, you know, the setting up the rig and everything like that, and self-belief, because these are all challenges beyond like physical or mental challenges. But what do you see as the biggest hurdles or challenges to kind of overcoming this, to help those people?
I think a lot of it is the attitudes towards music, and feeling like in order to say that you are a musician, you have to meet a certain kind of benchmark within a certain kind of field. So a lot of the work that I do is really unpicking that kind of negative self-belief about, you know, what it is to be musical, what it is to be able to sing, what it is to be able to perform, or be competent as a performing artist. And that's why I kind of like quite often kind of downplay what I do, because I don't think it's necessary to be a musician to work in the field of music. I think, you know, just having an interest and an understanding and kind of, you know, almost more of a technical role is something that's really exciting for me. And so I kind of like downplay a lot of my own skills. I still can't play an instrument with any level of competence, but that hasn't stopped me releasing my own music and running a record label and going on to teach other people. And I kind of know where my limits are and go, right, I'll hand you over to a proper musician now and they can teach you, you know, music theory and things. I can't read music, for instance, so it just doesn't work for my brain. But a lot of the barriers that we face is about what is music. I regularly work with children who say, my mum says I've got a voice like a drowned cat. And I sink, absolutely sink, and go, well, you know, because singing in many ways is a confidence trick. It's in order to sing and project yourself, you have to unfold your body. And if someone's gone, you're terrible, you immediately sort of like curl back up. So there's a lot in there to unpick with things. Or a lot of people say, you know, it's like the noisy people in music lessons are told to be quiet. And it's like, and really they're the rock stars of the future that we're silencing. It's those people who are prepared to kind of go, you know, these were the rules, but they're not going to be the rules in the future. So, and a lot of the work that I do around, especially working with neurodiverse young people, is about exploring sound rather than music. So we'll quite often have sessions where I'll be rummaging around in the canteen at work, putting the pots and pans out, connecting microphones to them, and building soundscapes and kind of exploring rhythms that way. And I remember having a fantastic session with a young person um, in our sensory room. So we've got an amazing facility in our new space, which has got loads of vibroacoustic equipment for working with deaf and hearing impaired people. But it works super well for young people who've got any kind of sensory processing issues. And this young person in particular used to just lie on we've got a vibrating waterbed, which is amazing. And we can send all the sounds from our system into that. And I remember him sitting there with an analog synth, working his way through the frequencies, getting me to shout out what the frequency was, and then writing in a little notebook about how it made him feel. And it's, that's not really music. It's, it's almost like that's kind of physics or, a science experiment. But it's having that kind of open-minded approach allows us to get results that we might not get elsewhere. So for me, it's, it's always been about, what's on the edges of music. Where does music stop? What does it turn into next? And that's what I'm really excited about. And I've managed to bring elements of that into the work as well.
And it's an area that doesn't seem to get much visibility, or as much visibility as it should. And it's interesting that 12% of kind of global disease burden is on mental and behavioural problems.
Yeah.
Do you think the arts, and I'm going to broaden this a little bit, the arts and this kind of music therapy can contribute to helping with that, if it was more broadly accessed?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're doing some work at the moment around social prescribing, which is specifically about that kind of, the well-being effects of music, the arts, any kind of creative endeavour and things like that. So I think we're at the beginning of that conversation, but I think that at the moment there's kind of the issue where mental health is not on parity with physical health at all. No. So we've really got to kind of address that first and foremost, and sort of say, and the two things are so intertwined. It's like, if you're having mental health issues, your physical health will decline. So it makes sense to address them both together. So I think we're having those conversations at the moment. Personally, I don't feel like we're having them quick enough, and as ever, I don't feel like there's enough funding going into this area to really do this. But I'm hopeful that we are heading in the right direction now and starting to have those conversations. So yeah, I'm sort of quietly optimistic with a kind of can we just get on with it mindset as well, because we've seen it in our work. We use a well-being scale in order to track the benefits that all of our work has across the entire organisation. Although it's not perfect, we're seeing massive increases in people's health just from being in environments where they feel connected, supported, encouraged to do this kind of work, where they feel competent, where they just feel good about doing something and feel like, where it's a can-do attitude rather than any kind of, syllabus that we're trying to impose and telling them they're passing or failing on it. So it's an entirely different environment to be working on from what they're used to in schools. And yeah, by and large, we're seeing, massive improvements in people's well-being. And it's just kind of, our job to highlight that and try and be advocates for people and say, yeah, this is amazing, this is exciting work, and it will change your life. Yeah.
Now, I think we could talk about this so much more. And personally, I'm a huge advocate of the arts, and I think it's a hugely beneficial tool, personally, from a kind of theatrical perspective, and using people to learn skills, dealing with and coping mechanisms and all these sort of things. But just as a kind of final thought, how can communities or organisations support this? How can they make a difference to actually help?
I think the most important thing is to listen to the people who need that help, to listen to their voices. We do work with the deaf community, but they have a saying which I hold as like a tenet across all of our work, which is nothing about us without us, which I think is absolutely essential. The deaf community by and large are wary about hearing people telling them what they need. And I hold that as like a doctrine for everything that I do. So we try to listen to the voices of the young people and their families and the support networks that they've already got around them, and go, what do you need? What do you want to happen next? So increasingly a part of my work is about setting up the steering groups and the forums and the kind of safe spaces for people to just tell us what's going on. So that we can kind of address that. So I think that's super important, is to not assume but to ask. Is always the first protocol for us. So there's no real straight answer, and if you ask people, they will give you lots and lots of different answers, and sometimes those will contradict each other, and that's fine. And just so it's just, I think the important thing is to start having the conversations out in the open, just not being afraid of asking people what they need.
Absolutely, and go on the journey together.
Absolutely, side by side.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's been absolutely amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you in future Break Talks.